Yeah, carrying on from the interesting conversations I've had here the last few days. I'm going to tell you about the Ibogaine story, or my story with Ibogaine in Portugal. But before that, in 2013, I was a high-functioning, malfunctioning crack cocaine addict who managed to somehow, through a miracle, grow some businesses in the UK and managed to collapse them, or close to collapse them. Anyhow, I found Iboga in 2013 and was treated by a provider. And I had a suicidal death experience in my visions, and which took a long time to sort of come to terms with and so on. And time passed, and I was still intrigued about Iboga. And so it was always on my mind, I need to do something about this, but I kind of wasn't ready, and I wasn't ready. And what happened was that I didn't have a support structure, so I relapsed. And it made me realize that there's more to Iboga than just doing Iboga. So anyhow, what happened was, well, actually, I'm going to rewind a bit. So in Portugal, we do have a drug problem. We have a problem mainly with opiates, long-acting opiates, methadone, Suboxone. But the Portuguese drug problem started quite early on in the 70s. And in 2001, they made a very brave decision to decriminalize drugs in Portugal. This was spearheaded by João Goulão, who is head of CICAD. He's on the management board of the EMCDDA. And I was really following this story and reading about it and trying to understand the country that I was planning to live in, and seeing if there was some traction anywhere, whether there was some potential to introduce Iboga into this marketplace. So in 2015, maybe I should open my notes actually. In 2015, I introduced Ibogaine to João Goulão, who is a gentleman I just mentioned to you. And interestingly enough, I had a conversation with Ben earlier from ICEAS that they had also done the same a few years earlier. And he actually did mention that to me, but there were many changes at government level and many changes at, well, CICAD was formed, and it was kind of lost in the mix. So we were quite happy to engage with him and actually bring Ibogaine back to the forefront of their mind, even if only for a little while. So he said to me, "I love your presentation. This is great stuff. I can't believe that you managed to get out of crack addiction with Ibogaine." I was quick to advise him that it wasn't just the Ibogaine. And he took me aside. I was actually with his top psychologist as well that day. He took me aside. He said, "Alvaro," he said, "this is great work. But if you don't do a clinical trial, forget about it." So that didn't really make any sense to me. Clinical trial, you know, what the hell's a clinical trial? I really didn't know. I was completely out of my depth. I'm a crack addict, or recovering crack addict, who has been told that to get something to market, you got to do something with it that is totally beyond me. So this was kind of a bit of a stumbling block for me. So in Portugal, we have Infarmed, which is the equivalent of the FDA in Portugal. Now, I've never met such a prescription-orientated race as the Portuguese. Now, when you go to a pharmacy, you've got to take a ticket. There's so many people getting drugs from the counter. And so it is rife in Portugal. Prescriptions are the way forward in Portugal. So this organization, Infarmed, you know, is heavily involved in the Portuguese public, even if only through the companies that they allow to supply. Now, so off I went, and I was really fortunate. It could have been through Gita at the time, to have been connected with Ibogaine GMP, Ibogaine HCl manufacturer. And I got a lot of support from them. And we decided, I don't know how we even got that far. I must have been crazy at the time in one of my missions to do something substantial. And we decided to embark on a clinical trial. I had no idea what this meant. I had no idea how much money was involved. It just sounded amazing. You know, someone's offering me to get involved and do a clinical trial. So off we went. Then he said to me, well, it doesn't just work like this. You need a, I keep calling them private investigators. They're principal investigators. You need one of these guys. You need a contract research organization. You need a project manager. You need a lot of money. You need a clinic. You need GMP Ibogaine. So then it was getting even more substantial, and I was sort of thinking, okay, well, let's make this happen. So I met a chap who worked at a neuroscience laboratory in Portugal, and he had a great interest in entheogens, and he said to me, look, this could be really interesting. He said, if you can patent a molecule or be involved in a molecule of this nature in Portugal, this is fantastic. I thought, this sounds good. Okay, so all of a sudden I have a principal investigator working for me. And he knew a clinic near Lisbon. Now, this was an addictology clinic, as well as they had their own laboratory facilities for testing. They were the perfect partner to get involved with this. And they told me, well, we got a bit of a problem because your protocol looks good, but we don't just have an opiate patient. They might do cannabis, they might drink alcohol, and your protocol is too rigid. So you need to do something about this. So we tweaked it and played around with it and so on. Now, the journey continued, and we found a project manager. Now, these people were wonderful because they gave us a lot of information. They kind of helped us move on to the next stage of finding a contract research organization. I mean, who the hell are these guys? Well, they kind of run the trial, collect the data, make sure that you are following protocols and so on and so forth. So that all came together really, really nicely. In the meantime, we had to submit the clinical trial to EUDRA, which is a European clinical trials database. I mean, that was a mission in itself. You would have thought that would be easy, but it wasn't that easy. And countless hours and hours and hours of rewriting the protocol, sending it back and forth, back and forth. And I could have had a pilot license by now with the hours I spent on this damn stuff. I kind of missed all the Portuguese story of where they're at. You know, the Portuguese decriminalization story is very interesting. I mean, we have HIV has come down as a result. Hep C is more managed. We've got allegedly less drug-related crime. We got potentially less drug-related incarcerations. Now, there are two sides to this information, and the pro-campaign attribute this to resources being channeled into more substantial crime, for example. So hence that sort of data. But the opposing campaign attribute it to lax laws. Now, people say to me, and have many times at this conference, wow, Portugal, fantastic, drugs are legal, you can do what you want out there, let's go and set up a clinic. Well, I kind of probably thought the same. It's not the case. It is not the case. It is so conservative, there is so much red tape, you know, and don't do this alone. Don't run like I did. It's just complete craziness. You don't want to do it. You really don't want to do it. Now, just to touch the decriminalization story in Portugal, there are many factors beyond decriminalization. You know, they have a strong foundation of socialized public health care. You know, they consider drug misuse as a healthcare issue. You know, they're channeling 80–90% of public money. Instead of fighting drugs, they're actually investing in healthcare goals. So we have quite a unique landscape here. And it seems nearly obvious that Portugal is the right place, but it has its challenges. And we have the equivalent of the FDA, who is extremely challenging. Now, I'm kind of gonna, you guys have confused me completely because I had this like all beautiful, it is flashing on the screen and doing all that crazy stuff. And now you've ruined it. So I'm gonna talk to you about, I feel for you. I'm going to talk to you about what we did, this clinical protocol that we were going to follow. So we had the clinic, we had the CRO, project managers, investigators, my hard-earned children's school fund, we had it all together. And this protocol was titled an open single escalating fixed dose study of the safety and efficacy of ibogaine in opioid-dependent subjects. Our objective was to investigate the short-term effects of ibogaine on opioid withdrawal during a 1-week detox period. Now, that's the inpatient phase. This was going to take place in this clinic outside of Lisbon, which had superb facilities. Furthermore, to investigate the safety of ibogaine during acute in-hospital opioid withdrawal and during an 8-week post-evaluation follow-up treatment. We were also to investigate the long-term effects on craving and substance use on opiates during an 8-week follow-up. That's the outpatient period. And we were going to have secondary questioning such as possible somatic and psychological effects of ibogaine, possible predictive factors for response to ibogaine, and the evaluation of pharmacokinetics, and so on. Now, I'm not going to go into the design of the full study because I can't, but I can tell you that the sample size was of 12 active opioid-dependent subjects that were seeking treatment at the time. Now, in addition to detoxing with ibogaine, patients would also be subject to multiple medical screenings, neurological, psychiatric, cognitive examinations, and further examined with drug dependency and drug withdrawal checklists. So each patient would also have to voluntarily sign an informed consent document. So with the protocol in hand, we were ready. We had this team all built. Now, just give me a second here while I plow through this stuff. Right, so had a great meeting with my project managers. We were all getting excited. We were having Skype calls with all these experts. To be honest, I couldn't really understand the language. It was beyond me. And some of that has been beyond me here at this conference, believe me. But they turned around and said, I'm really sorry, but this study or clinical trial, phase 1 and phase 2, is just a pilot study. It's actually too small to get market approval. Now, I believed in my naivety that this would get me to market. I mean, that is just total naivety. This is a guy running off with something, trying to make something of it, but not really knowing what the hell he was doing. And, we live and learn. So all of a sudden, we were running with it, and then we weren't. And furthermore, they told me that to get a trial of this nature where you could potentially get the product to market, it was going to cost me 7 to 15 million of the money I hadn't earned yet. So that was it. We abandoned. And in the meantime, while we were creating this noise and getting this clinical trial pilot study on board, people were knocking at our door going, we need treatment, we need treatment. So we kind of did what many people have done. We started treating people. And every single time we treated someone, I had this really big guilty feeling inside. Something is not right about this. It's got to be beyond 5-6 days. Even if you have a really good setup and systems in place and you got really good people around you helping you, they need so much more when they leave your front door. When you drop them off at the airport, they've got a big grin on their face, but they might enter the plane and that face is going to drop. What am I going to do now? It's really quite disheartening to hear when someone has relapsed because you couldn't go beyond your offering because you just aren't able to. So we have stopped treating patients. But what I can tell you is that we did follow some very strict guidelines. We got all the correct testing criteria, the eligibility criteria had to be adhered to, and we didn't have any adverse effects. But it's only a matter of time, as I keep hearing here, something eventually is going to go wrong. So I am absolutely convinced that the medicalization of Ibogaine treatments is absolutely essential. Now, the challenge that I have in Portugal is that conservative doctors will not prescribe or be involved with medication that hasn't got a big fat medical label with an instruction manual inside the box. That is fact. It's just not going to happen. So I think we got to get a little bit creative. Now, I'm not going to talk about that. But being extremely deflated that I couldn't get even the pilot study off the ground. Now, it's still possible that we could manage this. But the fact is, it may end up in a medical journal and just get lost. And this is the fear, and I think we've seen this time and time again. So I haven't really given up yet. I find myself as a crossroads at the moment. Do the businesses I know so well, or take a risk and go for Iboga? Now, I am investigating, trying to have Ibogaine, because you won't get Iboga to market. You need to have a medicine that's synthesized, really. But to try and achieve orphan status in Europe for this potential drug to solve this problem. Now, I had it on the screen, as you could see earlier, but I'm going to try and find it for you. So I just want to explain to you in real language what orphan drug status means. Just give me a sec here. Right, okay. So here we go. So the Orphan Drug Act provides for granting special status to a drug or biological product to treat a rare disease or condition upon request of a sponsor. The status is referred to orphan designation or sometimes orphan status. Now, orphan drugs are developed to treat patients suffering from a very serious disease for which no treatment, or at least a satisfactory one, has so far been available. These diseases affect only a small proportion of the population. They say less than 1 person per 200,000 in Europe. Now, I have no idea on the statistics, but I think this is an area really worth investigating further because it might be another route to have this recognized, which is so important. Now, having stopped treating people for the simple reason that we need to medicalize it. The other reason is we need to offer aftercare attached to what we are doing. Just what we heard yesterday here by some of the other speakers, it just shows it is so, so important. Now, I do, however, believe that there are some other modalities that we could consider. There are modalities such as emotional freedom technique, EMDR, which is great for PTSD, focusing on yoga, meditation, Reiki, massage, so many possibilities. Even crazy shit like laughter therapy. It really does amazing things. Family mediation. We're going back to our families. We've got to sort this out before we kind of start reintegrating. It's all about detoxification and ongoing nurturing of the mind, body, and soul. It really, really is. Now, I'm kind of going to finish very shortly. In case I get my presentation up. So, right, whether it's conducting clinical trials, setting up a clinic, a rehab, these are all really, really big challenges. Now, Portugal, despite its forward-thinking policy, has a really, really long way to go. You know, they are not really open to other modalities at the moment, really. We need to keep knocking on those doors, keep making noise, and I believe that eventually something's going to stick. Now, my vision is that Ibogaine made available on the national health in Portugal to all those that need it. Now, this is really quite a big vision, and I think we have to believe in things to finally get there. And that Iboga be considered as a parallel and potentially recognized alternative or addition to other and existing treatment modalities. It needs to be given the same importance, stand on the same platform so that patients can make informed choices. Thank you.